Hello, everyone. Welcome to our finals edition of the DFS or DFS Down Under show. It's taken me all year to get that wrong, Hef. How are you tonight, mate? We've got a massive show tonight, mate, and I've already dropped the ball early.
We've had a couple of takes tonight, Smatho, and you've nailed it every time. So this one's definitely the one that sticks. Good to see you again for another week. It's good to have footy back. We had a week off and you tried to get me to watch some NRL and stuff, but no, I stuck firm. I said, leave me alone. Footy's on next week. We'll be back. So I can't wait to get stuck into it.
Geez, you must have been pretty bored then.
No, not at all. I've been doing heaps of research, heaps of prep for the show, as I always do.
Look, I'm looking forward to all this preparation from you, mate. Also, tonight, over the last week or so, we had the DFS community voted in our DFR's All Australian 2019 AFL side. We'll be releasing the positions of our selections in this particular side tonight. So I'm looking forward to showing the team that you guys have selected for being Australia's best for 2019 in AFL DFS. So let's get on to the show. Big four games, and we'll always start with Smatho's thumbs up, and that's about it for thumbs up this week. We had no worthy winners on the weekend since there wasn't any AFL large slates. My third place in the Manly versus Storm game was potentially thumbs up worthy, but just couldn't get the biscuits over the line. Hef, I'm sorry.
No self-thumbing up for a third, Smatho. We want winners for the thumbs up. And how about this week? Set yourself the goal to thumb yourself up this week. I think we could have put that better. But let's see you win one this week, Smatho. That's what I'm getting at.
Oh, at least you said it was a thumb. Could have been something else. Anyway, let's start with the back line for the All-Australian team. If we get the avocado to bring up our first 6 selections in the particular side, and Smatho Hef has managed to get himself on a halfback flank there on the side there. Also in the team is obviously Chris Eddy, 999, already selected in his fullback position. Matty Lee at centre-half forward as well. And then obviously on the sides there on the half-bank is Rexall 9. Donkey in the back pocket there, just don't know what he's doing in the back pocket. And then our people's champion, the social media star, some say Donald Trump-like, garnered support like Jacko Baker. He's in the back pocket. He actually had a really good live final, so he walked the walk and obviously he talked the talk. So he's in the All-Australian side, Hef.
Yeah, beautiful. I hope these other blokes are good at playing defence because I'll be running around looking for cheap kicks all day.
Basher Hooley style,
never played the back line in my life. But it was a good bit of fun. The All-Australian voting and the polls, we had a great amount of votes, actually. They were all over it. We talked about your dismal attempt at some polls early in the year, but these really took off. So thanks to everyone who got involved. It was a bit of fun. And halfback flank, I'll take that.
You'll take that. We'll release more positions throughout the show. So congratulations, Hef, on your selection. All right, let's get stuck in some football. And let's start with Thursday night elimination final. West Coast Eagles are hosting the Essendon Bombers. West Coast have a large line around 29.5 points, whatever you look at, with a total points of 158.5 line. For our sites, Moneyball have released a $25,000 single contest, and DraftStars have done a $75,000 single match contest as well. We've got the teams tonight, Hef, dropped in, so there are actually numerous changes here, so I'll go through them for you, mate. For the Eagles, Will Schofield, Nick Nananui's back, Mark Hutchins is back as well. Out go the side is Liam Duggan, Oscar Allen, and Jack Petrocelli. And then for the Bombers, as always, they usually get 5 or 6 blokes in every week. Carl Hooker, Jake Stringer, Orazio Fantasia, Dyson Hebel with his bung foot, and Will Snelling. Out of the side goes Dylan Clark, Michael Hartley, Josh Begley, Martin Gleeson, and Tom Jock. So, already live on our Daily Fantasy Rankings website and free to use as always, our data tools and our previews to all of our single game contests this week. They're all up available, ready for you to get your tools, get your thoughts together. And then we have our main man here, Jesse Penfold. He dived in the resources for me, and he's come up with this little nuggets of gold for us straight away. Last 5 rounds were particularly damning for the Bombers, he said, conceding them third most points in the league over this time at a whopping 1,692 points per game. Essendon are getting obliterated in the ruck this season, as he goes on to say. Conceded 96 points per game to the opponent's number 1 ruckman, which is the 4th highest mark in the league. So, Hef, what's your initial thoughts of this particular matchup with Eagles having a very large line?
Yeah, it is a big line. I'm a little bit nervous that the Bombers might be able to come over and steal it after the Eagles' pretty woeful performance against Hawthorn, but maybe that was the wake-up call they need. As you say, we've got 4 great previews up already on the site for all the finals. So go and give them a read, and we might try and touch on some things that Jesse might not have picked up, but he doesn't miss much, Jesse. They're definitely worth reading, so we'll see what else we can find.
So let's start off with the rucks. Nick Nat was obviously named tonight to come back in the side after his ankle injury. He'll go with Tom Hookey in a dual ruck setup. And then also they take on Tom Bellchambers in the ruck. So I'm thinking that with Nick Nat coming back, his time on the ground stats won't be fantastic, and then obviously takes away Hickey's upside. Does that mean I'm leaning more towards Bellchambers as your first pick in the ruck?
Yeah, I think you have to, just because he's gonna play the majority of the ruck. Nick Nat's ceiling is obviously capped with that time on ground, and then Tom Hickey's not that good a forward to make up for his limited ruck time that he'll be getting compared to usual. So you've sort of got to lean to Bellchambers on that. I don't think the slates can be won in the ruck. I think if you take Bellchambers or Hickey, that'd be my 2. I'd lean to Bellchambers. You can play McKernan in the ruck on Draft Stars, which isn't the worst option for a reason I'll touch on later on, but I think Bellchambers has got to be the top pick, and that's always really scary to me.
Yeah, tough decision. Look, I'll probably lean towards Bellchambers for a safe score, but I wouldn't be surprised if either Hickey or Nick Nat do pay off their salaries. Nick Nat is pretty high, so probably with the lowest own out of those 3 lots. Let's move on to the defence, and as Jesse in his article states, playing linked Bombers backs with an Eagles stacks looks viable. So what does that mean? Does that mean I just play Bombers backs because the ball's going to be down in their back line quite a lot?
They do hem them in a bit, the Eagles, and they do give up points to backs of any position, really. So we'll have a look at some of these Bombers. Andrew McGrath, we talked about him a couple of weeks ago with Harakis out of that midfield mix. We thought he might get a bit of extra time in there, and he turned up. So he's still under 10K on Draft Stars. He's about mid-6s on Moneyball. So I think he's going to be pretty popular with that 100 sitting next to his name. The issue, though, is Heppel comes back into the side. So McGrath's usually one of the first to slide back onto a back flank or a position like that. And before he got that ton, he had 10 games in a row where he didn't reach 80 once. So the range was sort of between 60 and 79. So it's not a disaster on Draft Stars. He's around 9K if he gets around that 70 mark, but it's not that great for Moneyball. He got 63 last time these 2 teams played. I think he's going to be pretty highly owned, and if you're looking to go away from the field, he's one guy I'd sort of be looking at possibly fading or building a different lineup and trying to get an edge over the field that way. Who to pivot to? I reckon Mason Redmond's a pretty good option. He won't be as popular as McGrath. He scored 91 over there when they played earlier in the year. Looking at other backs, maybe Kale Hooker back into the team. I think Hurley's probably going to play, even though he looked like he wrecked that shoulder last week. But in that case, he might just be there, happy to fill a role, not being 100%. So maybe Hooker is more likely to get some more ball in the back line. And that same angle I'm looking at with Shannon Hearn, who's got this dodgy hamstring, they reckon. He's not one to chase cheap kicks, Shannon Hearn. So also notice Duggan's out of the team, Will Schofield's in. So there's another guy who's not great by foot. So they might look to use Lewis Jetta a bit more. coming out of that back line. So maybe Lewis Jetta might outperform his salary too.
A bit of Redmond Jetta action. I like it, Hef. I like it. All right, let's move on in the midfield. And with a 30-point line, you assume that the Eagles midfield will get on top of the Bombers midfield and especially score a few more points their way. But do we have enough cash to throw around? There's not many particular great value selections throughout the sides. Do we need to get a bit funky with our mids or try and go all out and jam them in?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to go someone cheap in the midfield, and there's no obvious 6, 7K guy that we can throw in, except for they brought in Mark Hutchings, who went really well in the live final game against Adelaide over there and scored 70-odd. But I'm pretty sure he's coming back into tag Adam Sard like he did earlier in the year, which was key to the Eagles' win after Sard ripped them apart the year before when they caused a boil-over over there. So I want to stay away from Hutchings for that reason. You're going to have to look at a guy like Maston or McGrath or Parrish. But I think you really want to spend most of your money in the midfield. So you can probably get 3 guys in there if you spend down in the forward line. So you're looking at your Yos, your Gaffs. Jesse made an interesting point in his article about Jack Redden. Great final series last year. Often more of a contested contest. That's a great word. Great phrase, contested contest. But he thrives on that even under stuff, Redden. So the finals game should suit him. He's pretty well priced. And looking at the Bombers, I think Zach Merritt's the obvious guy who stands out. We saw the Crouch brothers get stuck into the Eagles a few weeks ago. Merritt's also shown he can go big in a loss. If that eventuates, he had 140 against the Dogs when they got smashed a few weeks back. He's the obvious guy for Essendon.
You can also check out the free data tools on the side and look back to round 23. You guys played Hawthorn, is that right?
Yep.
So people like Warple went massive, Amira, et cetera. So, yeah, if you run a couple of mids from the Eagles with your stud from Essendon, such as Zerrett, could be good times for you. Now, looking at the forwards, some good value plays here. I really loved Rioli from the Eagles. 6K on Moneyball. He's getting a bit more of a push-up role from the half-forward line. He's probably one of my selections. Is there anyone else that tickles your fancy for the Eagles or even for the Bombers itself?
That's probably as expensive he's been all year, Rioli. But you look at his last 3 games there in WA, he had a 92, 109 and a 94. So they're great returns at 6,000. Yes, he's definitely in play. I think Jamie Cripps is a guy that we can maybe look at. Jesse flagged him as well in his article. He's come back off this injury, had a few games under par, and so he's down in price now, 5,800 Moneyball, 8,400 Draft Stars. He got 89 against the Bombers earlier in the year, which would be a great return on those salaries. Just the week off, a few games back from injury, I think he'd be primed now, Cripps. So I like his upside in GPPs. And don't be scared to play an Essendon goal kicker. So I mentioned this with McKernan in the ruck before. We've seen teams against West Coast, they get out the back of the web. One guy can bob up and score above their salary expectation. We've seen Darcy Fogarty, we've seen Brody Myercheck, Luke Bruce, Terry Mackay, even Josh Begley had 76 last time. Not huge names, but there's always one guy who tends to get in the clear out the back and can bob up and kick a few goals. So whether that's McKernan, whether that might be Mitch Brown, if you sort of like a forward for Essendon, it could be Stringer. I wouldn't be scared to play him.
Okay. All right. We'll keep an eye on that for tomorrow night. So 8 o'clock kickoff, around 10 past 8 tomorrow on the Eastern Seaboard here for the Thursday night footy. Let's go on to the next selections of the All-Australian team, and now we're going to bring up the forward line. 6 more selections here, and we start off with our full forward in JK123. Also here was picked with Asanke, who is the Draft Stars 200K live final winner at centre half forward. Selected in the pockets is the Western Australian duo of T. Better and Brownlow Fife. And then on the half-forward line here, we've got Procession and a line for life. So well done to all those DFS players. You get the luxury of hitting the scoreboard up the pointy end of the field there, Hef.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong forward line, isn't it? Looks very like the Eagles forward line, actually. A lot of really, really good players there. Brownlow Fife, do you reckon he'll be well named in a few weeks, Smatho?
Oh, I reckon he's a red hot go, but depends on his last 6 or 7 rounds. He might be winning, and then there might be a few chasing real late. So it's going to be a good count. We might have to have some little sneaky tips prelim show week. See if we can get us a Brownlow winner in a couple of weeks' time.
Sounds good. I'll be kicking home Bontempelli, I think.
Oh, okay. Oh, just let that out of the bag pretty early. All right. Well done to those 6 DFS players up the best end of the field. So well done on your selection in the DFR All Australian team. Friday night footy, Geelong versus Collingwood. Huge game at the MCG, not GMHBA Stadium. Currently a 3.5 line to the Cats, so they just have the small edge in the markets with 150.5. We'll go about the line in the total in a minute, Hef, but obviously Moneyball, another $25,000 contest available on Friday night, $75,000 on DraftStars. In team news, Jordan De Goey should be back from his hammy, and Jaden Stevenson will be back from his betting suspension. Pendles plays his 300 game as well. For Geelong, Jake Corradashny and Tom Atkins are fit to return after being left out in round 23. Don't rule have a good gauge in terms of selections for Geelong, and you never know, there could be late changes on a Friday night, as they seem to do all the time. I'll skip to the weather alert. There's a 90% chance of rain with around 5 to 15 mils forecast on that Friday, so hence that total is 150.5. So if that starts creeping back up, then also your narrative might need to change from a slog to more of just a normal kind of game of footy. Now, Jesse's article is live on the DFR website, and he's gone on to say that Geelong have conceded the fewest fantasy points in the league this season, while Collingwood has scored the most. So, and also he goes on to say that the backs for Collingwood have ballooned out over the last 5 weeks, conceding up to 96 points per game per player. Mate, this is going to be one of those games where a fantasy team scores a lot and the other team doesn't let them score that much at all. What are your initial thoughts here for Friday night?
First of all, I'm really hoping the weathermen get it right, because this is going to be really important. What happens with this weather? Now, the MCG, it's not like the old Elwick racecourse that can't cop rain. The MCG can take rain better than any place in the country, I reckon. So it doesn't matter how much rain they get during the day. If it's not raining come game time, it'll hold up really well. If the rain comes during the game, then we're going to get a really slippery slog of a contest, I think. So I've even seen reports of thunderstorms and hail, but that's sort of mid-morning, mid-afternoon at the moment. So that's going to be vital to keep an eye on when picking your teams. If it does rain during the game, then we want to target the tacklers and those guys that are around the ball. We don't want to be looking at the seagulls off halfback, I don't think.
All right. Let's break this game down, starting with our rucks. Now, Brodie Grundy, can he get to his lofty salary against Reece Stanley? Look, I checked the ruck analysis tool on the DFR website, and I've just shown that every opponent that Grundy's gone against this year, only one has scored 100 points or more, and that was Max Gawn earlier this year in the Queen's birthday game. So, look, a pretty leaning hard to Grundy, but at his lofty salary, should we make it a priority to get him in?
Do you remember round 1, Smatho?
It was a long time ago, but they did play the Cats, didn't they? Cats and Collingwood, yes. So how'd that go?
Reece Stanley 85, Brodie Grundy 84.
Oh, well,
yes, I got carried away after this with Reece Stanley. Round 2, I said Max Gawn was gone, and Reece Stanley's an underrated hard man.
Yeah, that's right. You said the rucks were gone, like irrelevant.
And then we find out that Gawn was in hospital, so I plead ignorance on that one. But Stanley hasn't covered himself in glory at all ever since that. So I don't know what happened in round 1, but it's something to keep in mind. I think you've got to try and find a way to play Grundy. If it does rain I don't know if that takes away from Grundy's around the groundwork or not. But what I do think is that you've got the double ruck stack option in the wet. I think Stanley can. I think he can get to his value if it rains. So he's a ruck forward on Draft Stars, so you can do it on either site. If it's wet, I'm pretty happy to play the double ruck stack, but I'm going with Grundy as my top pick.
Excellent. Yep, we'll get to him. We'll try and get to him. If you can't, then obviously Stanley is a good consolation prize. You never know. They might even pick Zach Smith. You never know. That's the Cats for you. Now, for defence, as I mentioned earlier, you really want to be playing Cats against Collingwood. So you got any stacking options down back for Cats players?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to go against the resources when they're so strong on points like this. So Tom Stewart's the obvious one. He's the premium guy down back for Geelong. One point I will make is that if it is really wet, that isn't really conducive to flicking the ball around the backline a lot. So maybe the backline guys, we might be more looking to guys around the ball. So you can either spend down on a guy like Jed Bures and hope he gets amongst some tackles, or you can go with the midfielders like Crisp and Duncan, who are named in the backline on respective sites. Wet conditions are really going to hurt someone like Jeremy Howe, Darcy Moore. So it's very weather dependent again.
All right, let's move on to midfield. And look, so many premium studs for both teams in this particular contest. Since we've already paid up to get Grundy, it's going to be hard to jam probably two more into our mids. Looks like it's going to be pretty easier with Moneyball when you've got Narkle and Noble midfield available. But would you be playing them on Draft Stars possibly?
Yeah, they're so cheap on Moneyball, those two. They're basically locks. One thing about Noble is he's more of a receiver on that halfback flank there. So he's up to about 8,500 on Draft Stars. If it is really wet, I'm a little bit nervous about Noble.
Yeah.
I'm not so nervous about Narkle because he seems to be able to get in there and get his own ball a bit more. But then Narkle's 10K on Draft Stars when you're talking from that angle. So he's not a lock there by any stretch, but I think he's still playable. I'm sort of looking at the tacklers through the midfield. If we're on this wet track theory, Rupert Wills is someone who's a bit cheaper, but he's a really good tackler. He's actually leading the Pies. He's about 6 tackles a game.
Okay.
You got Taylor Adams loves a tackle. Trelaw's another one who manages to get in there and tackle well. So they're guys I'm looking at. From the Cats, Cam Guthrie actually leads their midfield in tackles. So if he's going to be in and around the ball, then he's a bit of a cheaper option in your midfield. One we really need to talk about is Joel Selwood. Jesse's flagged him in his article. We know he's had different roles through the year, which has really affected his scoring. But if they're ever going to put him back in the guts, Smatho, it's going to be Friday night, and especially if it's wet conditions, which he thrives in. I think he's a great play if those conditions come to fruition. I just can't see him leaving him out on a wing in a big game like this. And I think it's pretty obvious, but the number one guy is Patrick Dangerfield, I think. Big game. He's a big bull. If it's a bit slippery, he's going to be in there. He's going to be pretty highly owned, though. So if you do play Danger, you're going to have to find a way to differentiate yourself somewhere.
Interesting, Hef. Yeah, look, there's royalty everywhere in the mid. So you find that even like Pendlebury in his 300 game, that's kind of his kind of conditions as well. He'll thrive on that. So could be some good ownership once the contest locks and checking out who has who. So let's move on to forwards. Again, that narrative, if it's raining, sure, key forwards are going to be no good for us. But let's focus then on tackle stoppage players. Does Dowhouse, Chris Mayne fit in that kind of bill, or they're just a little bit too outside for my liking?
I know what you're saying there with Mayne. But he's basically another on-baller with a pretty high ceiling considering the price they put him around, especially on Moneyball. So I'm happy enough to play Mayne in the wet. Very happy to play him in dry conditions. I love playing Chris Mayne. especially on Moneyball. Dalehouse is up there in tackles, so is Tom Atkins, and interestingly, Brendan Parfitt's actually the leading tackler for the Cats at over 5 a game. So.
All right, cool. All right.
So he's sort of in the mix. Jamie Elliott's an interesting player for Collingwood. He's coming off 2 big tons. I think he's going to come up pretty big in the Robots projections, which could drive some massive ownership. I'm always looking for a really popular guy to maybe go against Smatho. I think Elliott might be the one, especially if the rain comes. He's up against a very strong Geelong defence. He is prone to having a mare too, Elliott. He can really throw into 30 or 40, which would just kill these lineups. So I'm not saying he's a bad play, but he definitely fits the bill of someone you might take a risk on fading with those big tons in his recent history.
Yeah, I don't like Elliott here. Dalehouse is interesting. I didn't think that he was more of a tackler per se, but over 5 a game, and if it starts raining, get him in and Parfitt too. So, but we'll keep an eye on this weather, and obviously if you got mates in Melbourne, you'll be obviously texting and saying, is it raining? Is it not? Is it raining? So keep an eye on Friday night.
Can we send Parks to the ground?
Yes, we will. Yeah, he'll do it.
Excellent.
I mean, he's got to drive 3 hours, but sure, he'll do it. All right, it's time now to announce the bench players for the All Australian. So these particular players kind of missed out on the first round of voting, but through the wildcard rounds managed to garner enough support from the DFS community. So we're pleased to announce the interchange for this 2019 All Australian team include Stimpy 870, Briz 17, the Bristle Man. I Am Game, if you're not too sure, I Am Game, he's actually Pete from AFL Ratings, the really popular resource of aflratings.com.au. A little sneaky shout out to you, mate. And a little Tassie boy, Trent _L, managed to get himself a bench spot as well. So 2 Tassie blokes on the bench there, looking pretty good.
Good to see. Good to see. I tried to sign Briz up to Twitter so vote for himself, but that proved very, very difficult. Maybe next year for the Bristol Man to get him on the field. That shows you the strength of the team because they're 4 really good players. So well done to them.
Yep, they're always up the pointy end of the leaderboards if they're in a particular contest. So this is no token bench spot for you. They're well deserved for those 4. So congratulations on your selection in the side. Saturday afternoon footy, elimination final. GWS Giants are playing the Bulldogs. Bulldogs have a 3.5 line to cover. Totals are a bit of a high, 162.5. In team news here, Hef, the man with the busted larynx, the voice box man, Nick Haynes, is going to be possibly returning to the side. He probably can't talk or breathe. No, well, Darren Lockyer or all those blokes that can't talk anymore. It looks like he's going to suit up for the Giants. Jacob Hopper is now fit, and also Toby Green are set to return after having round 23 off. Brett DeLudio is also another possible inclusion. He's actually fit to go. So outside Cornelio, actually, Giants are actually pretty healthy, and they'll have a few to select. So there's going to be a few missing out there. Only Tory Dixon is in doubt with his hamstring. So, again, Bulldogs do have a few to select. Jesse's article is also available on the DFR website, and he's gone through the resources for you to say that these 2 teams are actually the toughest to score against throughout the season from a fantasy perspective. The Western Bulldogs have actually conceded the 5th fewest points in the league, while the Giants give up the 2nd least points. We also use our taggers tool here on the DFR site, and we always know that when you play the Giants, we have Matt DeBoer as a possible tag in the side. So, Hef, I'll get to you shortly to name your tagger since you've been doing that so well this year, copping the tag. Hef, this is a massive game up in Sydney. Also, the Giants are actually not favourites at their home ground in a final with the Bulldogs up and about. From a fantasy perspective, what are you looking at?
Yeah, that's the Bulldogs did give it to him a couple of weeks ago. Just look at the teams from that. Hopper, Cameron, Mumford, Finlayson, and Deledio all didn't play for GWS, and they're potentially all coming back in. So there's a few really key pieces there. As for the Dogs, it's only really Tim English that missed last time. So there's a bit more firepower there for the GWS, but nothing overboard. But it's something to consider when we're looking at that match from a few weeks ago.
So wouldn't read too much into those high scores from the Bulldogs then?
I'm not going that far, but more so Hopper is, if he comes back in, he's going to affect the midfield mix of GWS. That's going to have some ramifications for DFS, I think.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's go with the Rocks then. And look, we missed out on the entree of Mumford versus English back in round 22, I think it was. So they're actually back. Projected to be great value on both Moneyball and Draft Stars with their projections, and surely we might have to look at some double ruck stacks for this particular matchup because they leak points to each other and they're pretty cheap.
Yeah, I know you love double ruck stacks. I threw that for you on Friday. There's some people who still haven't forgiven these two, English and Mumford, up ruin that slate. We can't repeat some of the comments, but it's such an interesting matchup because Mumford is just going to bully these ruck contests. So he just looks like he's going to get a ton of hit-outs, but he's not going to be able to keep up with English around the ground. We saw him trying to chase down McKernan a couple of months back. One of the highlights of my footy viewing this year. So I think that really works well for a ruck stack because they got different ways to get their points. So Mumford's going to get his hit outs, English is going to get his points around the ground. So they're not really competing as much as you might think, considering they're going head-to-head in the ruck. So if I have to pick one, I'm going with Mumford because he's cheaper and I think he's got a higher floor because he's going to get all those hit-out stats. But yeah, I think you can definitely make a case to play both on Moneyball with your flex, and if they both pull out again, at least we can have time to change this time.
Yes, we do. It is the first game in the afternoon, especially if you're playing those 2-game slate on a Saturday. At least you have a chance of changing those positions. All right, so let's move on to the defence for this game, and according to Jesse, these teams are giving up the 4th and the 2nd fewest points in the league to the opposition top 3 scores of position. So not really worth to paying up down back. There is some good premium options from the back line there, but are we wasting our salary paying up in the back line?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's not too bad, but I sort of look at that round 22 game and some of these backs, the outside runners, they scored really well. Like Zach Williams, Haynes, Kennedy, Davis all scored pretty well in relation to their salaries. For GWS, Suckling, JJ, Jurea, they all did a good job for the Dogs. So I don't think it's totally dire for the back lines. I don't have any great opinion on who of those stand out more than another, to be honest. I think I'm going to use my back line to complement which midfields I pick for my lineups in this game, but my favourite spend-down options, if you want to go that way, would be Adam Kennedy from GWS, who doesn't have a huge ceiling, but he's been really consistent lately. And Lewis Young's been doing a pretty good job down back for the Dogs, and he's quite cheap. So they're my favourite cheap guys.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the midfield. And, geez, there's, as we talked about in the previous Geelong game, and there's a lot of high-priced mids to jam in your side, and they'll be really hard to get them in. Especially on Moneyball, there's a lot over 10K. It's probably imperative that you nail your studs in this particular matchup to make cash. Any takes that you're looking here in the midfield?
Oh, there's so many gun mids in this game. How do you choose?
So many. Yeah.
You talked about Dubois. He went to Bontempelli in round 22. Bontempelli's the obvious guy to tag because he uses it so well. I assume he's going to go there again. So that makes it tough for Bontempelli. He got 95 last time, but that's not enough. So he's a total contrarian play if you want to play him at all, just because of that tagging reason. Riley West is going to be really popular at 3,500 on Moneyball, just because he's got a couple of 50s so far, and then you can cram in some big guns. You can use your flex to play another big gun in the midfield if you want to, but you're going to have to play Riley West if you want to load your midfield. So the big question is, are those big guns going to go big enough to carry Riley West? Or Or do you look at sort of the second level guys like Lipinski, who went berserk up there last time, Hopper back into the team, has had some big games this year, and Lockie Hunter, if he gets all by himself out on that wing, maybe you go with those cheaper guys than Kelly and Whitfield and McRae and obviously Dunkley in your forward line. I'm keeping in mind these teams are generally pretty stingy, so they're not all going to go berserk. So picking that right mid is going to go a long way to working out who wins. Gun to my head, I'm going to go McRae for the Bulldogs and Josh Kelly. They're my two favourite big price mids.
And cool. If this turns out into more of a massive contested kind of real finals footy atmosphere, whips are cracking, you definitely have Josh Kelly. Is there anyone apart from McRae and the Bulldogs he might look at as well, or do you reckon Bont just gets tagged out of the game?
I think he does. I think Dunkley's the obvious one, but he's playable in the forward. We might as well talk about him because he's just a total pig, Dunkley, and he doesn't hurt you by foot, so they're just going to let him go. There's no reason not to play him at all if you can fit him in, which is going to be pretty difficult. There's other forwards there. Do we want to have a look at the forwards?
Yeah, so the question I had for you for forwards is obviously Toby Green was out round 23 and obviously Kelly's now back. Green coming back in the side. Where does he play? Does Leon Cameron stick him back in his midfield role or does he go back in the forward line?
Yeah, so when he played in round 22, Kelly was first game back there, but now they're Green played a lot forward there, and now they're bringing Hopper in as well. So I'd nearly bet my left pill that he's going to play forward. Nearly, because that's too big a call to bet on Leon Cameron at the moment. But 3 reasons. He's a better forward than the other midfielders are. His kicking and decision-making, it seems to be better around goals than it is up the ground because he just sees the goals and goes for him. Up the ground, he can torch it a little bit, and he's coming back from injury, Green. He might be a little bit sore, so maybe that's more reason to spend time forward as well. So I think it's pretty obvious he's going to be forward. It doesn't mean he can't score. Like he was flying against the Dogs, he ended up getting 99 and missing a lot of the last quarter when they played, but it does put a cap on him. You can't see him having those big 140 games like he did in the midfield. So I'm not saying he's a total favourite. I don't really want to play him. Green. We talked about Dunkley. Now, Giray is a forward on Moneyball. Obviously, he plays in the back line, so that opens up Moneyball for a nice big Dogs backline stack if you're that way inclined. Over on Draft Stars, if you don't want to spend up on your forwards and you really want to pile in this midfield, you can use Riley West and Will Hayes both as forwards, and they're pretty good scorers, especially Hayes runs through the midfield. West has been up forward, but he can find the ball. So
sorry, Hef, I just lost you there. As you were saying, mate.
Yeah, the Gremlins got us again. I was talking about Riley West and Will Hayes. They're both forward eligible on Draft Stars. So if you want to go cheap and get as many midfielders into your lineup, there's your option there on Draft Stars. In terms of GWS forwards, the Dogs were giving up a lot of points to forwards early in the year, but they've really pulled that back. Now, I find it hard to make a case for any of these GWS forwards, to be honest. Cameron went massive against the Witches Hats, as we know. So he's priced up now on Draft Stars. He's a bit better on Moneyball. I don't have any great opinion on playing any of these GWS forwards. So I'm leaning to the Dogs, those cheap guys, Dunkley. I'll be preferring to get my GWS fix through the middle of the ground.
Interesting that Jesse Penfold does love Jeremy Cameron a lot. Also 150 to get the Coleman. Do you reckon he has that potential to go big again, or just maybe not?
Yeah, I'm not knocking him, but I'm not in love with it.
Fair enough. All right, it's time for the midfield and selections for the All-Australian team, and we have 6 worthy DFS players being selected in the guts of the AFL team. Let's bring up the side again, and look at this. William 09 and Brody 4 were selected in the guts straight up with, but congratulations to the other midfielders of I Love Lamp, Clangers, Jay Barrett 16, and DFR's own J to the P on the wing there. Pretty strong looking DFS players in the gut. So well deserving of their selection side.
Yeah, that's a really strong line again. It's looking like a pretty good team, Smatho. Who are we playing?
The NRL boys. Take us on. NRL.
Can we find a super coach mob to take on? Surely.
Oh,
That's
jeez.
something for you to work on, I think.
Jeez, bit of like Anchorman style Channel 5 news team. We just need more news teams to rock up and have a
you
biff.
bring your trident.
Well, obviously Rick's there ready for us from I Love Lamb, so I'm sure he'll do well for us in a battle.
Beautiful.
But well done to those 6 massive Australian DFS players, especially in the AFL, and well deserving your selection in this year's side. Saturday night, Richmond versus Brisbane up in the Gabba. Richmond are small favourites here, 6.5 line with a total of 161.5. In team news, probably Cedric Cox will probably make way for Alan Christensen for the Lions. And for the Tigers, after Toby and Nankervis brought the VFL side from the dead last week, he should make his way in the side and possibly do a dual ruck role for the Tigers, which would be the first time this season that they've put 2 potential rucks in the side. Look at the resources on the DFR. So, Hef, just straight in there, mate. Get in there.
You can change that probably with Cedric Cox. You can change that to definitely, because he looked like a 5'8" Mason Cox at the MCG. He won't be playing. That ruck situation at Richmond is interesting. I reckon they could really mess with their structure if they have the 2 lumbering rucks, Soldo and Nankervis. It's a nightmare for DFS. We've talked about Tom Lynch being thrown into the mix, sort of just breaking up that small forward line they have. If they're going to have another ruckman, not as athletic as Charles and Bolter, geez, I'm really sceptical if they go that way.
Okay. Now, the resources on the DFR side have suggested that Brisbane are consistently difficult to score against all year, conceding the first lowest amount of fantasy scoring. Over the 5 past weeks for Richmond, though, they've just given up 1,500 points per game, which is quite low. So it's actually the lowest in the league in the last 5 weeks. So they've gone stingy as well. So could be another stingy, low-scoring matchup where possibly 800 points on Draft Stars might get you the chocolates. Let's start with the rucks. 4 rucks is going to be the go. Nankervis, Soldo, Martin, and the Big O all going at it. Probably it's going to be the hardest pick of your ruck selection of all these 4 games this weekend. Who are you looking at out of these 4?
I don't think I've ever seen 4 big stiffs like this go head to head in one game of footy. But the way I look at it, we know how the Brisbane rucks go when they share the ruck.
Yes.
We don't know what's going to happen with the Tigers with Nankervis. So if they go this way, I'm happy to go with Steph because you know what we're getting. It's not like Nankervis coming back holds any great fears in terms of ruck scoring because he was the second leakiest guy all last year. If they don't bring back Nankervis and they just stick with Soldo as their main ruck, then he's obviously a viable play, but it just makes me feel ill putting rucks in my lineup when they come up against Brisbane because these 2 are big, solid men and they really restrict the other team.
So gun to your head. Those 4?
Steph.
All right.
Easily Steph out those 4.
Be safe. All right. Let's look at the defense. Then all season long, we were targeting the Tigers' defense. There's always been a great play this year, particularly the premium backs. They usually ton it up down back there. So back in round 23, these 2 teams met down the G, and both Daniel Rich and Luke Hodge did score particularly well in that particular matchup, making true to the data that we have here on the DFR site. So should I just be clicking those 2 names and moving on?
Well, you raised an interesting point in terms of game theory here, Smatho, because these teams played last week, which is extremely rare. So the easiest thing for people to do is just look what happened last week and go with that. So like you say, Rich and Hodge scored really well. Do they get over-owned here? Because people just look at that and say, well, they'll just do it again. Same teams, why not? On that angle, you're better off looking at Witherden or Adams or Gardner or Ainsworth or Zach Bailey, some of these other Brisbane backline players. On the surface, they're hard to play because they had a bit of a stinker. and you want to go with the guys that prove themselves. But remember, we're coming back to the Gabba now. It's not at the MCG. So I'm kind of thinking that those guys who did really well last time are going to be over-owned. I'm going to have a look at some of those guys to bounce back off a poor showing. I'm a huge rep for Zach Bailey. He's really cheap on Draft Stars, so he's going to suck me in again. I just think he's got 10x upside easily. So I'm really keen to play him. Talking Tigers, I like Jaden Short's upside. Titchy Edwards is running through the midfield. Jesse's pointed that out in his article. That makes him a really solid play as a back on Draft Stars. And Draft Stars has priced Hooley quite well too. The one thing I love about Hooley is when the game is, if the game sort of blows out, Hooley's the man who's always running for that extra +6. I love that about Hooley.
Yeah, fourth quarter specialist he is. Junk time. Yep. He's the man back there. All right, let's move on to midfield. And Lockie Neal just got the 3 votes, well, possibly 2 votes for the Brownlow after he went bananas against the Tigers there. So he's probably going to be a popular selection in the midfield. We talk about tagging, and Richmond don't tag as well. So should be a safe play for Neal. But also taking down these single contests, he might have to go contrarian. So who else are we looking at here in the midfield?
Well, it's the same sort of angle, that like 100, what do you get, 160, Lockie Neal, 50-odd touches. He's going to be so popular, but he's so hard to fade because they're just going to let him go. We know how good his record is when he isn't tagged. Zorko's a bit the same. He's pretty well priced, and he went really well against Richmond. He's been really good all year, actually, Zorko, even though they've toyed with different roles for him. It's hard to see both of them failing. If you want to be different, maybe you just pick one of them. There are enough value options you can play both. Looking to pivot away from them if you want to. Jared Lyons is coming off about an 80, so he's going to be a bit less on the radar, but he loves playing at the Gabba Lions, and he does have that huge ceiling as well. So he's a guy you can possibly look to if you're trying to get away from these popular guys. The Tigers midfield isn't very high scoring generally at all, so it's hard to find someone other than Dusty who has a big ceiling. Maybe the option there, if you want to play Tigers midfielders, is to look at the cheaper guys like Cochin or Lambert, who only need to get to about 80 odd, and they can save you a bit of salary. And then if they do hit the 100, it's a massive result for them. But Brisbane don't give up many points, so it's really hard to play the Tigers midfielders, and you know that Richmond don't care if Brisbane fill up through the midfield as long as they're winning at the end of the day. So it looks pretty straightforward, and it's sort of hard to get away from that.
Yeah. One thing I particularly looked at was the actual total points. I thought Brisbane and Richmond are low scoring, but we've got it as 161. So let's look at the forwards then. And, Charlie Cameron was only held to a 40-odd in that particular matchup in round 23. I'm expecting a bit of a bounce back there. Or should we be looking elsewhere if we're going to have key position forwards kicking a fair few goals in this particular matchup?
Yeah, held being the operative word. Like, that was disgraceful, some of the stuff that Dylan Grimes was getting away with. The only person who thought it was good umpiring was the Avocado, but we know his track record on the show lately. Now, Charlie reckons he was hiding a few tricks from Grimes. That seems all too easy for me to say after you've been given a bath. He said he didn't show him the speed. He was holding it back a bit, but yeah, I'm not buying that. I love Charlie at the Gabba, but Grimes he's a super player. Grimes, he just looks like a great matchup for him. So it's a no from me for Charlie Cameron. In fact, the whole forward line for Brisbane is their Achilles heel. So as much as the numbers say Tigers give up fantasy points to forwards, I'm having trouble finding a reliable Brisbane forward to plug in. The cheap options like Hippie and Rayner, they can pull out a game at sort of the cheap salary, but they can also throw in a real stinker that would sink your lineup too. So they're risky guys. Not much better looking over at Richmond because Brisbane have a really good defence. Jack Riewoldt and Lynch, they're still on the cheaper side for their ceilings. I don't think they'll both get hold of Brisbane. You've obviously got Harris Andrews is going to go to, I assume, Lynch. I do think one of them could get off the chain, though, so I'll be looking to play one of those two if you're that way inclined. maybe go left field. Liam Baker is an interesting option because he's been playing behind the ball. So maybe his downside's a little bit less than that of a true forward. He can run around and get a bit of a cheaper array of disposals, and he's been looking pretty good, Baker. So he's someone to consider as well.
Very interesting matchup, this particular one. It's going to be a good game on Saturday night. It could go either way, or it could be actually like a real bit of a blowout, depending, because also they go play next week. So good luck with your fantasy teams this week. And Hef, well done getting through 4 massive games of AFL DFS. But we've reached the crescendo here of the show tonight, where we announce the vice captain and the captain of the All Australian DFR side of the year. And I'm pleased to announce that after polling the DFS community here in Australia on Twitter, vice captain goes to Broady 4, and the captain of the All Australian DFR side goes to Chris Eddie 999. Gents, congratulations on your selections as the vice captain, the captain of the team from the part of the community here in Australia. Congratulations on that particular result, Hef.
Yes, very well done. Great concept and great to see all the buy-in from everyone in the DFS community. They really got stuck into it, some in more ways than others. But it was a real bit of fun to get us through that week off, and I must have only just fallen short in the captain poll, did I, Smatho?
Oh, look, I have to go back to the Electoral Commission and check the votes, and might get our F throwing his toys out the cot. Jeez, you went back to the Electoral Commission and asked for a recount. That's just no good from you, mate. That's just no good, but he's back. Mate, massive show. Now, I was just about to say, I'll have an article back up on the DFR website with the full team on the site, and I'll be looking forward to presenting each member of the DFR profiles your trophy to go on your trophy cabinet. So for people who've got the Mountain trophies and the Dominator trophies, Hef, you and all of your team members will receive a 2019 trophy for your cabinet. Now, obviously, once our back end is up and running, ready to go, we'll let all our users know that our rankings and profiles are back on our site. So looking forward to presenting those trophies once they're available. Hef, massive show. Sorry about the technical difficulties that you have to endure to our little program here. So obviously we'll try and get it going again next week. Also, there are some other DFS sports going on. NFL this weekend in Hef. That starts on Sunday night, so make sure you check our Week 1 preview. Make sure you go back to our podcast with Jay about how you construct lineups. The massive DraftKings VIP experience is up for grabs, so we'll tweet out the contest link so we can follow that along on Monday morning. Pretty disappointed what happened with Red Zone, unfortunately. I tweeted out earlier this week that we were going to get it for free, and all of a sudden it's double in price. So no good. But that's how it works. That's sometimes how it works. But we're looking forward to NFL back here in Australia for DFS. So massive show, Hef. Looking forward to our 2-game slate next week for the semi-finals. So we look forward to catching you all back next week for the next edition of the DFR DFS Down Under show. Hef, massive show from me. Well done, mate.
Thank you. We'll double our price next week too, Smatho.
OT time. Excellent. We'll see you next week. Cheers, mate.
See you, mate. Bye.